cannot let him reach me.
As it was completely expected, Sylvanas did end up betraying the jailer. The jailer essentially said, "Oh no," anyway, and discarded her, gave Sylvanas her soul back, and left her at our mercy. However, now we're left with a huge cliffhanger until 9.1. Will Sylvanas now join us? Will we give her a trial or just end her immediately? Is there going to be a redemption or not? Brought to you by Gamivo. Use my link to get Shadowlands and Game Time cheaper as well as any other game. Use code DORON for an additional discount. I'm guessing by now all of you have seen the newest Sylvanas' Fate cinematic, which is ultimately the finality of the Sanctum of Domination raid. Pretty much, things happened as we had predicted them in the past. The jailer reached Oribos, the Arbiter. That orb from the Arbiter really did fill his hole in the chest that we all really saw coming, and just how the Primus returned to his true form as he acquired the Sigil, the jailer also reached his ultimate form through the Arbiter. Then, Zobal essentially says that he is tired of the Maker's flaw design and that soon everyone will serve him, which also further revealed some of his motives and goals that previously we could really only speculate on. Recently, we learned more about the first ones, who they are, and what really is this grand design of the Makers. To sum it up real quick, first ones are like the 7th cosmological force, in really general terms, the Titans that ordered the Titans. Long ago, the 6 cosmological forces existed in opposition to each other, and they imposed a balance upon the universe. Now, we don't really know how they really affected the jailer, but it is certain that he searched for forbidden knowledge on how to undo this, and for that reason, he was imprisoned. However, now with the newest cinematic, I think his motives are at least a tad bit clearer, but not really confirmed, of course. My theory now is that he essentially wants to break this mechanism that keeps the balance, and then he wants to rally Death as a force to conquer others so that Death rules over the entire universe and he is the true and only master. That is, of course, all from the jailer's perspective, but let's take a look at Sylvanas and what really is her future now. The hints that Blizzard laid out in the previous cinematics proved to be true, that she was starting to doubt him, and when he said that everyone will now serve him, that really irked Sylvanas and she decided to immediately abandon his side. Now, I gotta say on first glance this is just really stupid because you would think, obviously, she has served him for years, and now I do agree with that, but Blizzard did explain this in the most recent book, Folks in the Fairy Tales, if you have not followed the story. To sum it up real quick, we learned that Zowal had manipulated her ever since her death during the Third War, and he kept a portion of her soul hidden. Then, after Arthas as the Lich King failed, he decided to jump ship and just use her instead. So he essentially gave her these visions that she will end up in the Maw and not Ardenweald, which should have been her destination. And while that was true, the only reason she would be in the Maw in Hell was because he was holding her soul there. But Zowal presented this to her in a way that this flawed design of the Makers doomed her there, which wasn't really the case. It was just this guy held her hostage. So essentially, he gave her the illusion of choice of how she will help him break this mechanism that ultimately doomed her to this place. This really explains why Sylvanas didn't see herself as actually serving him, but instead she thought she was an equal partner, or at least a partner in this universal cosmological mission. Now, I know you may be critical of the writing, and honestly I am to an extent, as well as I always took Sylvanas for a really cunning and intelligent character, so I thought she would be able to just see through this. It seems quite obvious. I mean, ultimately, she did start to see through this when she reached the Shadowlands, but it was obviously too late. For someone that played 4D chess for a decade and manipulated us all, you would think she would be smarter than to abandon her master so that she would ultimately end up in our hands. You know, the people that have been her victims for years now. It really doesn't seem like a genius plan. So that pretty much explains why she decided to rebel, but the actual question is, what now? Okay, she left the jailer, her own soul is back, she is whole again, so what do we do? Do we kill her? Do we force her to stand trial? Do we redeem her? Or will something entirely different occur? The first key thing to note here is that Sylvanas that we will soon face will be different than any other version of Sylvanas that we had ever seen. As the Jailer split her soul through Frostmourne back during Warcraft 3, she has always been split, very similar to what we've seen happen to Uther. So now the Sylvanas that we will face should be her actual full self, which of course I'm not really saying that redeems her of her actions, of course, but you can see that with a change in her voice as well as the color of her eyes. While we can only speculate, what I feel like is almost certain is that we'll need to extract some sort of information out of her. This seems quite obvious. Thus far, Sylvanas looks like the agent of the Jailer, his closest associate, and I'm guessing aside from the Jailer, she has all the most up-to-date inside information, who the first ones are, who are the rest of his agent, what is his actual plan, and most importantly, what are his weak spots and how can we actually stop him. The fact that pretty much no one else in the universe has this valuable information, at least as far as we know, gives her a lot of leverage against us, which almost guarantees that we will not just execute her on the spot. Her information could literally save the universe, but that also brings all of us into a really tough spot. Are we actually going to start working with Sylvanas, and what are we going to do, you know, with all the crimes she had committed thus far? Really, the Banshee Queen has done so many outright evil acts that are equal to the Lich King himself, and I'd say some might even be worse. Despite the reality that she was manipulated and taken advantage of, I really don't think there will be enough to absolve her of her sins. My worst fear right now is that they decide to go the good guy route, which could really just completely ruin the story. Since we have Jaina and Thrall, there may be a possibility they don't want to stoop down to her level, and they decide to offer her a completely fair, democratic trial, which to me honestly is just completely unacceptable because really that time has long passed. However, as both Thrall and Jaina did get burned quite a bit recently, they also have their vengeful side. I'm almost certain that we will first have to extract the information, but after that, in my opinion, the best case scenario would be some sort of a sacrifice, as in Sylvanas gives us all the inside info and then she slams herself into the Jailer, helping us in some way. Sort of a Broxigar, destabilizing the portal to help against Sargeras vibe. I really believe that with the way the current situation is laid out, that would be the best way to go. It wouldn't really be a redemption, but at least she would do one positive thing to undo some of the bad stuff she has brought down on us. In this scenario, Sylvanas really wouldn't be a hero, but she would at least be somehow useful. Worst case scenario, in my opinion, is if we decide to give her a complete and fair trial and then she somehow escapes. Q flying away scenario number 10, but I think the chances for that are really slim. I think everyone just wants to see the end of her character. Or Sylvanas could escape, open a portal to an alternate planet and try to form the Iron Undead Scourge. Thank you for watching. Check out my reaction to the actual cinematic by clicking on the screen, and also check out Nono's Academy for videos on real world history and science. See you next time.